Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final episode of the Neighborhood series featuring the distinct neighborhoods of Russian River Valley and Sonoma. I am so excited to be here tonight with two people representing our final neighborhood, Green Valley, which also doubles as its own ABA. In fact, it's the only one of this series that is its own ABA. If you have not caught the first 5 episodes of this series, I highly recommend you circle back and watch them. They are filled with wonderful information, focusing on each of the different neighborhoods and all the inhabitants that exist within them. So the wines, the people, and we've just learned so much throughout the course of this process. I am delighted to have been a part of it. I hope it's been enjoyable for you as well. Without any further ado, I would love to introduce my two guests for this evening. I've got Anthony Austin. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Gio Balistreri from Russian River Vineyards. Did I say it right?
You got it correct. And
Yay!
Cheers to you as well.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, it has been such a fun journey traveling virtually throughout the Russian River Valley, which is, of course, a place that I love. It is world renowned for Pinot Noir and many other varieties, but we've only been focusing on Pinot throughout the course of these last 6 weeks. I know that you guys have been there for a little while. I'd love to paint the picture of Russian River as we've done the past few weeks, with just some, anecdotes of what you think of this region that people have sort of known and come to love. Gio, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So again, thanks for having us tonight. Cheers.
Cheers.
Anthony Austin's my mentor and basically partner in this business and partner in crime. And what he's taught me so much about winemaking in this area is that it's just the diversity of the AVA Russian River Valley is just so vast. And so one thing that I've really wanted to focus on in my winemaking is to showcase that. And so I make wines from almost every neighborhood that we do. So in doing so, I've just learned how different this AVA is from, a 15-minute drive from here to a 15-minute drive to this vineyard. The flavor profiles in that wine are just completely different in the size of the clusters, the canopy, everything about the plants can be totally different. So when we get to the Green Valley, it just showcases that real cool climate, that fog, tons of like dew, and every vineyard in the morning is basically wet because there's just so much overcast and that fog from that morning, fog that comes in the morning. So it just really paints that picture of how different each one of these wines are. And as we taste through, you'll see we started at the lowest elevation in the Green Valley to kind of the middle elevation of the Green Valley. And then we get to the top at Anthony's estate vineyard at the highest part of the elevation of the valley that's near the town of Occidental. So it's just that one little snippet of the diverse AVA that we're going to talk about tonight.
It is wildly diverse, and even within the neighborhoods, as we've learned, and as you just alluded to, so much diversity even within there. Anthony, do you have any anecdotes? You've been in the Northern California region for a little while. Anything that you think is remarkable or special about Russian River?
I've made wine in Santa Barbara for many years, and I've specialized in Pinot Noir there. And I find the climate here and there very similar, except for the humidity and the day length in the summer. And this has longer days, and it tends to make lusher wines. And I find that very intriguing. The other thing that I'm seeing in especially Green Valley is the influence of the flora. And I saw that in Santa Barbara to some extent. I mean, there's a lot of scrub brush and a lot of really fragrant, aromatic weeds there. And here we have redwood trees and forest floor. And I see that as impacting very much Green Valley fruit. Not so much Russian River because all the roads are gone. But I find that really rich forest floor character is still prevalent and very much so in Green Valley.
Interesting. Well, I'll be sure to look for that when we're tasting. And you're the first to give us that sort of comparison between something that's existed within the neighborhoods and other major growing regions in California, like Santa Barbara. So that's really helpful, at least for me. I hope for you guys out there watching that was helpful, because oftentimes I think we're trying to sort of figure out, well, what makes Pinot Noir so different, even within a state like California. So thank you for that. Green Valley, as you both alluded to, even though Russian River is known for fog, right? Green Valley in particular is known for fog. So let's talk a little bit more about, the moisture situation and also what makes Green Valley distinct from these other neighborhoods within Russian River Valley. And Gio, I know you work with all of these, and Anthony, I'm sure you have as well, but beyond is it the fog specifically? You've mentioned multiple different elevations. What do you think is so distinct about Green Valley? And also, the fact that it's its own AVA really sets itself apart in so many ways. Why do you think there is that distinction that's been given to Green Valley versus some of the other neighborhoods that exist within Russian River Valley?
Yeah, 1983 is when the AVA became an official federally identified AVA. And then 2008, it was renamed to the Green Valley of the Russian River Valley. So it's the only one that actually has hard boundaries around it. It encompasses Forestville, Drayton, Occidental, and Sebastopol, the towns within its borders. For our initiative with the neighborhoods, we didn't want to draw those lines because there's so much carryover in between those lines. That's why it's so blurred. As you can see on this map, but Green Valley being established in 83, it had those lines, but it still fell within the Russian River Valley. So it had its own identity. And you touched on what makes it so different. I mean, the fog is one major thing, but it's also the soils. There's on the valley floor, there's a lot of gold ridge soil. And Kayla, were you grabbing that soil? I've got a little example of what
I love a good soil sample. Send it over.
Looks like. So if you see this soil,
yeah,
gold ridge, what this is sandy loam. It's super fine. We call it moon dust because when you're walking through the vineyard, if you have dark clothes on, they turn instantly gold because of the dust just gets kicked up and it's so fine. But the beauty of this is that the soil is so well drained, so it allows the roots to really flourish into the ground. There's some clay in there, so you get decent water retention as well. But you can also get fertilizers and different organics into the soil. So if the grapes need something, the soil uptake is really great for the nutrients that you put into it. So the fog in the soil is great. And then just that it's the sun, it's warm. You get those cool mornings and cool afternoons, but you don't get super, super hot days. They're just kind of nice, warm days. So those are some of the elements that really sets it apart. And those conditions are also kind of the guidelines for the TTB to set an AVA and to make one. So those are some of the factors that went into it.
Do you think that there's any possibility of any other neighborhoods acquiring their own AVA at some point?
I touched on it earlier. When we set out on this, it was an exploration, and it was never the intent or the idea to break up the AVA at all. It was just to really showcase that diversity. And that's why on this map that you're looking at, there are no lines. It's just each neighborhood fades into the next. I just don't think it would be right to break it up anymore. I think Laguna Ridge and where it touches Santa Rosa Plains, there's some differences, but there are some similarities, and I think that's the beauty of it.
Gold Ridge soil and fog. I'm hearing a lot of that kind of across the board, but more specifically in Green Valley. Anthony, anything you want to touch on? Anything you want to add?
One of the characteristics of the Gold Ridge is underlain with clay. So the soil is not really, really deep like it is in Russian River. It is an alluvial soil that is pretty much bottomless. There is a limit to it. And the top layer, the loam, the sandy loam, has water retention capabilities, but you can stress the vines very easily in the Gold Ridge soil. So you can control really the maturation a lot better if you choose to. So that's to me very interesting.
Do you have any issue with ripening over in Green Valley? I mean, you mentioned that it's a little cooler. Sunlight isn't quite as judicious as maybe other neighborhoods, but is there any potential of anything being underripe there? Or do you think it's in that sort of that Goldilocks sweet spot?
I think with that, because of the elevation that I touched on, here's an example at the estate. We'll harvest 2 to 3 weeks later than Carol Kozlowski's vineyard that is 2 blocks up the road. So it's
wow.
maybe a couple 100 feet elevation higher, but they're 2 to 3 weeks ahead of us.
Wow.
And our bud break happens after theirs, harvest, everything happens after theirs. And it's literally 100 yards, maybe 200 yards up the road from us, but we have such a difference in ripening and harvest time. So yes, to answer your question, it is a little difficult because of the elevations to ripen the fruit. They all ripen at different times as well. I don't think, at the estate here in 1963, Robert Lasden, who founded this winery, Russian River Vineyards, planted Merlot. And that probably wasn't a wise choice to plant out here because
a little wet, right?
It's a little wet and really cold. And, prior to us taking over in 2008, I was told that out of the 10 years previous, only 2 years they harvested fruit because they couldn't get it to ripen.
Wow. Interesting. So, with that in mind, is Pinot Noir and potentially Chardonnay really the only things that we're seeing a lot of, and maybe Syrah out of Green Valley, as opposed to some of the other neighborhoods can do the Cabernets, they can do thicker skin grapes that will have extended hang time into October?
Yeah, I think you nailed one. I was going to say the Syrah does well. Cold climate Syrah is really awesome out here. But then you've got white fruit, Sauvignon Blanc,
sure,
a lot of that, some other white varietals. But Anthony, as far as the heavier reds,
no, there is. People try to ripen Zinfandel, and occasionally they do, and of course the Merlot. No Cabernet at all that I know of.
Yeah, I've never seen it out of Green Valley. I don't know it to exist.
Well, no one would advertise it because
yeah. I guess if we see it, I'd be curious, but I'd also be wary. Well, the proof is in the pudding, as I say. So let's, you guys have already dived in. It looks like I've got some glasses over here. I wanted to, again, paint the picture a little bit. I believe this is Russian River Vineyards where you guys are right now, right?
Yes. So we are in that hop kiln. We're sitting in that. We would love to be outside, and that was actually going to be the view, except the weather today. We've had rain, hail, sun, and wind all at the same time.
Wild. Well, better, I guess, now than when you're trying to harvest. So the wines that we are going to be tasting today, they are all Russian River Vineyards. We're going to be tasting 3 of them, in fact. So the Russian River Vineyards Estate Pinot Noir, the Russian River Vineyards Austin Estate, and then the Russian River Vineyards Horseridge Vineyard. So that's your lineup for this evening / afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Let's back out of here for a second. Let's get your faces back up so I can see it, and I'll get some wine in the glass. Now we're going to taste sort of in order of elevation. Is that correct?
Yep, you got it.
Cool. So we'll start with the estate. There's also this great map. I actually maybe want to pull back up here as we're tasting. I'll get it in the glass first, but there was a great map that you guys gave me of all your different vineyards within the neighborhoods. Look at that nice color. So definitely on the lighter side of things. Walk me through, what this estate is elevation wise and what we are generally looking for.
Well, what's cool about this wine is that it was planted in the late 90s. I believe it was 1998. And when we bought the vineyard in 2008, I went to look at the irrigation and found out that there was none. It was just completely destroyed. So from our first harvest of 2008 to the last harvest of 16, which is what we're tasting now, this was all organically farmed, dry farmed Pinot Noir. So it gives you a good sense of the water retention, and being at the valley floor, our water table is extremely high. So these plants, they did receive enough water to be healthy and grow. But on it, this is a 4-acre vineyard, and usually you would get about 3 tons to the acre on average at our site or sites around us. This particular vineyard would get 1.5 tons per acre. So that's the dry farming, the no irrigation that we had to deal with, just because that's what we were given to. But I think it creates for really great structure in the wine. Anthony touched on that stress growing, that stressing of the vine. So extremely stressed plants, not unhealthy, but just stress. And so what that does for me, what that does is the plants focus all that energy that they're pulling from the soil and put it into the fruit. And you just get these really awesome, complex flavors on the palate.
Yeah, Anthony, I'm definitely getting that forest floor, that sort of like savory thing that you were talking about earlier. But I think what's really interesting, and I'm wondering if this is a function of the fact that this you mentioned this is dry farmed. There is an enormous amount of concentration in this wine. I mean, it's deep, it's complex, and it's forest floor. There's a great amount of fruit, but the concentration, even though you're looking at it from concentration of flavor, not of weight, of body, of density, concentration of flavor is really kind of astounding.
You want to take that?
Oh, I agree with you. I think this is quite a lovely wine.
Yeah.
A good part of this is the fact that the vines are not producing much fruit at all. We get maybe a pound or 3/4 of a pound per plant. So the plants are not overcropped by any stretch of the imagination. And they're not watered. We didn't fertilize them. This is natural wine growing. And it comes through. I mean, you don't ask too much of the plant and it gives you this kind of wine. If you get a big crop, you have the same amount of flavor, just spread out over a lot more bottles. And so unfortunately, it's not economic to do that. So this is the last vintage.
This is the last vintage
of these particular grapes.
We replanted in 2017, so this is
okay.
the last of that. But that concentration, where for me, where that comes from, and I got it from Anthony, it's picking it when it's optimally ripe. You know, I like to pick on a little bit on the riper side. I think you just get a lot more developed and deeper flavors. We pick at night, so when the fruit comes in, it's freezing cold, and I do a 3 to 5 day cold soak on this, and I'm punching down twice a day, and that's where you're getting a lot of those concentrated flavors coming out of the skins over every day that you're punching it down. And so the yeast that I use, it's a slow starting yeast, so it gives us an additional 7 to 10 day cold soak. So it's just the extraction process that we do is slightly aggressive, but I think it comes out well.
Yeah, and I mean this in the nicest way. I mean, it's weightless. I mean, it seems impossibly deep in flavor, but it's weightless. It doesn't feel cloying or overwhelming. We touched on this a little bit in the last one with Alex of Kanzler Vineyards. He had mentioned a lot of the spiciness from his wines was actually coming more from whole cluster. Is that something that you guys do at Russian River Vineyards as well, or no?
Yes. So depending on the vineyards, like my estate vineyard out in Freestone, we don't do any cluster. The fruit out there is it's robust and not tannic, but it's just, it's a real robust, big Pinot Noir. And to put whole cluster in that, it just go over the top.
Yeah.
There is about 10% whole cluster in this. And what's so neat, when you actually, when you crush into stem this fruit and you take a handful of those stems and you smell it, it's almost like Christmas or this baking spice that you smell. And those are those characteristics that come from that 10% whole cluster in there. So it's spot on with that smell.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I can't wait to go back to it. I only opened these just, moments before we started, but I'll revisit this. I want to pull up, there's a few other photos that you guys had sent me. They're, really beautiful. And just again, like to tell the story of where we are. You can sort of paint this picture of elevation as well. So I'll share my screen so you can see it. So where are we here? Because this is kind of crazy to look at. We're looking at, it looks like, top down and then it swoops back up.
Right. So this is a little bit north of Green Valley towards the Middle Reach. You're kind of looking down to the Green Valley. When we get to the last wine, Austin Estate, the elevation of his vineyard is similar to the elevation of this picture that you see here. So it gives you a perspective of, elevation within the AVA and then where the Green Valley is sitting all the way out in the distance.
Under the fog.
Under the fog, exactly.
Just living under that blanket. And where are we here?
That's the same vineyard at that same elevation. Again, looking southwest towards Green Valley underneath that fog again.
So dramatic. Is that Green Valley is like lot in life to just be all the drama?
If we're outside right now, we've got those redwood trees on the horizon, to our west, and it almost looks like they're on fire because the fog comes up like that all the time, and it's happening right now because of this weather.
That's crazy. Yeah, this is, I mean, we'll get fog in Napa Valley, coming in and out like morning and early afternoon, but we don't get anything like this. This is kind of wild to look at. And then this is that map that I was talking about where we can see all of these vineyards that we're going to be sort of traveling through. So the first one, I guess, give me a number. Where are we here for the first one?
The first one, we're at that number 2.
Okay. So right here.
I'm sorry, number 2,
Number 2 is Austin.
2 is Austin. So we're at it's right around number 9.
Okay.
Since we didn't produce this wine anymore, it's not on this map, but it's right by the Dutton Ranch. We're a couple miles from that.
Okay. All right. So we're over here right now. We're going to be traveling over to number 2. What is or I guess we're going to be going to 2 last, and then going to number 12 next. We'll be going basically 9, 12, 2. What is the proximity, just so we know, sort of estimated between 9 and 12, between Estate and Horseridge?
It's probably a 6-minute drive.
Okay.
So 6 minutes, you would say?
10-minute drive.
10-minute drive as the crow flies.
6 for you.
Yeah.
If we had wings, it would be shorter.
It's close. Very, very close.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna get out of this again, and we will. Let's see. Let's get this next one in my glass. I'm not sharing anymore, right? Yeah. You guys can see me. I'm not sharing. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to pop over to the Horseridge Vineyard 2017, which I just said was number 12. So you saw it was that 6 to 10 minute drive, I guess, depending on who's driving between Gio and Anthony. I don't know. It sounds like maybe I want to drive with Gio. He thinks it's 6 minutes. Sounds like a zippier, more fun ride.
Let that one go.
Sometimes it is.
All right, so talk to me about this wine, because already I'm smelling it, and there are crazy similarities between these 2 glasses.
Yeah, so this is my first vintage of this one was 2014. Now we're on to the 17. Every year, the bouquet on the aromas in this wine are just consistently just fragrant, and just flowers and lavender and all these. You might get like these blue fruits in there as well.
Yeah, I get that.
So consistent.
That forest floor isn't, I think it was a little bit more on the surface of the estate wine. This feels like it's just a little bit beneath it, like it's cradling it, with all those like florals and blue fruits that you're talking about over top.
Seems to have less forest floor character than, at least than the last wine we'll taste.
Why is that?
It's an east facing slope, and it doesn't have that forest around it. The impact of the forest is geographically further away. It does have redwood trees in it, but it's the prevailing winds are not coming from the redwoods on this.
Yeah, and that south facing, it's one of our only vineyards that is south facing. So it gets sun all day, and then toward that late afternoon sun is kind of behind it. And it sets itself apart. You get so much fruit on the palate. It's so fruit forward on this wine, whereas the estate was that kind of earthier, more delicate style.
It is more generous. I will say that. Although I will say it's fruit forward. I think, sometimes we talk about fruit forward wines and people sort of have this idea of something more candied. The fruit is not overripe. It's, it's sitting in that sweet spot. If we think of, quality of fruit being candied and then underripe, it is, right in that middle ground at like a 5 between a 1 and 10, of just perfect ripeness. And it's interesting because as we've traveled through, we've seen different levels of ripeness throughout the Russian River Valley. There have been things that I've seen from neighborhood to neighborhood in the way of that, that really like bright, not Coca-Cola, but that Bing cherry that we sort of know Russian River for having. But it's been, sort of different levels of ripeness, and this feels, right at that 5. It also, both of these wines, I think this has been the only region that I think I've found similarities, as we're diving super, super deep into the micro world of these wines. This to me feels very similar to Sebastopol Hills, which I guess, makes sense given the fact that they are, next door neighbors. Would you Gia, you're like rearing to go. Would you agree with that, or do you think that they're very, very different?
You're pretty right.
I really appreciate what you said. I think we strive for that characteristic, not overripe, not that jammy kind of simplicity. I love to hear it.
Yeah, and I think when you get into the Sebastopol Hills, I've got a few wines from there. They're slightly more acid driven.
Yeah,
the acid's a little bit more predominant. I like to say they're a little leaner in style. You still get this kind of ripeness and roundness on this wine. If you compare it to my Emma's Vineyard, which is about 7-8 minute drive from this vineyard in the Sebastopol Hills, that acid it's a driver. And the fruits a lot leaner of fruit as well.
Yeah, it feels like it's more of a supporting role here, but it's definitely there. I mean, this is not a wine that is leaning heavily into the fruit. It feels very supported and very balanced. Great job, guys. This is delicious.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Should we jump into the Austin Vineyard estate next? Yeah, I think so. So, Anthony, I'm guessing since this is called Austin Vineyard, you maybe know a little bit about this?
Well, originally it was Left Edge Vineyard. I planted it during a presidential election, and I thought Left Edge would be really fun. And it turned out it wasn't quite as fun as I had hoped it would be. But it is my vineyard and nobody else had it, so I thought it would be simple not to get into that. I planted this.
You don't seem like a guy that likes complication.
I'm sorry?
I said you don't seem like a guy that enjoys complication. And I mean that in the best way possible. So we're moving to a different elevation here. Can you tell me where we were versus where we are now?
Yeah, so we were with the Horseridge, we're probably just climbing the hill towards Occidental. We're just gradually climbing the slope. This is I'll let Anthony describe, this is at the plateau at the top. He's kind of in a beautiful little banana belt where his neighbor's vineyard is literally surrounded by redwood trees. And that vineyard, it's a street away from each other. It couldn't be completely different, the two.
So we're at what feet right now?
It's about 860 feet elevation. It's right at the top of the ridge dividing Occidental with Santa Rosa Valley. It's slightly east facing, so I get morning sun and don't get afternoon late sun. So you get early warmth in the vineyard, which I think makes it a considerable difference in this from my neighbor's vineyard, which, as Gio says, is very close. And the wines are completely different. Same genetics, same grower or same nursery for the stock, but completely different wines. And part of that is the redwoods that they're surrounded by, and I'm surrounded on two sides by. And I think the most important is the fact that we get morning warmth on the ground.
One thing we haven't touched on, and I think it's maybe would be interesting to talk about here, is clones. Are we looking at the same clones kind of throughout, or different ones?
Pretty much.
Yeah, these three wines, they're all Dijon clones.
Okay.
In that late 90s, early 2000s, Dijon clones were the clone.
That was king.
Went strong, and I've been fortunate enough. All the vineyards that I work with are all Dijon clones. I'm gonna get some fruit from Bacigalupi this year, and I'm gonna hopefully get a different clone, whether it be Swan or Pomard, something different that they have, just to further showcase the diversity.
When you replant the estate, will that also be Dijon, or I guess you've already replanted it? So what did you replant to?
We already replanted, and the tough part was everybody replanted in 2017.
Yeah.
So getting the clones that I wanted was a little bit more difficult. So we did get some Swan clone, some Mount Edith. We've got some 115, and there's, I believe, 667 as well.
Interesting. As I dive into this wine, this is probably, I won't say the outlier, but this definitely has like more of like a zip to it, and has like it has like a savory undertone to it that I really like.
This Vineyard is 5 different Dijon clones. It's 828, 777, 115, 667, and 113. So it's a small vineyard, but it's I think there's a complexity that comes from that field blend. And it was planted specifically to make a single vineyard wine. So
yeah,
this was the concept from the day one.
A little salinity as well that I'm really enjoying. A little of that, like, you know, sea breezy, you know, I don't know, maybe because you mentioned Santa Barbara earlier, I can't like get the thought of sea breeze out of my mind. But I think you're right. There is, I think of these wines, this is the most Santa Barbara-esque. But there is like a bounciness to this wine that Santa Barbara doesn't necessarily have. Not that we're comparing the two. But I really like this wine. This has a light sort of ethereal quality to it. Again, depth of flavor, great complexity, really bright, really lifted. But you know, that great sort of focus, that forest floor, savory sort of tension that we've been loving throughout all of these wines. If there were just sort of a broad strokes, Green Valley is X, Y, and Z. Is it forest floor? Is it, you know, it leans a little bit more right in the center with a, you know, whisper of acidity, not so much that we see in Sebastopol Hills. Is that kind of where you guys think we are?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that you get, as you kind of pointed out, forest floor to kind of fruit, a lot of fruit and brighter flavors. And then for me, this is real elegant with those spice notes and
very elegant
characteristics. So it's a bit of an array, and that's why that elevation to me is so unique to each little level and the wines that come from it. So there's a great diversity within this little neighborhood itself.
Yeah, I think it's been really, really fun to see within this series just how diverse each of the neighborhoods can be, and then the diversity that exists within that. You can definitely feel that these are all related. You know, they all have something in common for sure. And yeah, elegance, I think, is where I am for Green Valley. I think elegance, if not that anyone or anything wants to ever be painted into a box, but if we had to, these are wines of elegance and grace more than anything else. I think texturally, they're wines that just have great intensity without trying too hard. I'll ask you the same question as we wrap up this show that I've asked everybody, and I know you know it's coming. If Green Valley were a musical instrument, either on its own or in a symphony, what would it be?
Gio said you were going to ask this.
Yep.
My first thought was a piano, because of the range that a piano has, the octave range and the sensitivity that can be expressed through it by an artist. And that a great pianist can make you cry, make you laugh by playing a piano. I thought maybe an organ, like a pipe organ, just because it's so spectacular, but I'll stick with the piano.
Okay, Gio?
Yeah, and I thought, I instantly thought guitar, because you get the valley floor and it's like Carlos Santana just chilling. And then you can get, as you climb up, you get elegance, but you get bigger, riper boldness up where Anthony's at, and you can get Led Zeppelin ripping on the guitar. So I just thought that range was spoke to me on what this could be.
That's awesome. That's really good.
I like it. Everything from Santana to Zeppelin. I think all the rock heads out there will be excited about that. I think D, all of the above. I think this is I think the class and elegance that exists within these wines and this AVA/neighborhood makes it so that we don't need to paint it into a box. I think it can be all of those things. I think, you know, this is a really well-dressed woman who can be very versatile in what she wears and pull it off no matter the circumstance. So I'm okay with all of those answers. And I think it's a fitting end to this entire series. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for wrapping this up with me. It has been a pleasure to travel through the Russian River Valley. I hope all of you watching have enjoyed it as much as I have. Big thanks to my partner and sponsor on this project, the Russian River Valley wine growers. They came to me with this idea. I thought it was awesome. I could have never imagined how wonderful it would turn out to be. And I've learned so much. I hope you guys have too. Once again, the wines we tasted tonight are Russian River Vineyards. You can find the link to purchase these wines in the link below. And of course, a link to the Russian River Valley wine growers if you'd like to learn more about each of these neighborhoods and the Russian River Valley as a region. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know there's crazy stuff going on out in the vineyard, so I won't take any more of your time. Cheers, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, cheers to you. Thank you.
Cheers.